And I'm back, and what I'm doing here today is I'm working on my 2003 F-150. It's got a 4.2 liter engine. Okay, so what I got going on with this truck is I got some drivability issues. So what happens is it starts and idles fine, but if I step on the gas, it stumbles. You know, so I can drive along. If I, you know, it's a manual transmission, so I'm in first gear. If I go really gently, you know, it's fine. If I go into second gear, it's fine. But if I, you know, I get into a place where I want to, you know, increase speed and step on it, when I step on the gas, it just sort of, the engine shudders a bit. And it's very similar to a symptom I had before when the camshaft synchronizer was failing. And actually what happened was the seal in the synchronizer allowed engine oil to come up inside the sensor. So let me see if I can get the top off for you. So this is actually the one that was in the vehicle when I bought it, before I rebuilt the engine. It's a perfectly good synchronizer, nice clean sensor and everything. Now the one that failed, you can look up there in the top of the video right there. I'll put a link, and that's the whole description of changing the synchronizer when it failed and putting in a new one. Now that's been a half a dozen years now, and these things are notorious on this model of engine for failing. And so before I do much more, what I did was I checked the plugs. I took all the plugs out and they look fine. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to dig down here a little bit. There's some work to get into it, but I want to get down and take the sensor off the top of the synchronizer and see if it's contaminated and see if the sensor is contaminated. And if it is, I may just change the cap, and if not, I'll change the whole synchronizer, because I've got this one here. So that's what I'm thinking it is. It's got very similar symptoms to what happened when it failed the last time. The other time though, it threw a code, or a 340, but that's camshaft synchronizer failure. But let me take a look at this. I want to find out if it is in fact synchronizer before I do anything else, because I ran a scan tool on it and it wasn't throwing any codes at all. I couldn't find anything. So it might just be, you know, a periodic failure, or it's leading towards a failure. It hasn't thrown a code yet. Sometimes, you know, it'll run bad before it throws a code, and I think that's where we're at right now. It's at a point where it's stumbling on occasion, yet it hasn't thrown a code. So let me dig in here and check this. Where it is, it's down in here. It's underneath. This is your EGR valve, exhaust gas recirculation valve. It's down under there. It's you know, basically it replaces the distributor, you know, the old distributor on these types of engines. They've been taken out, you know, where you would have the you know, the rotor inside and everything. That these synchronizers replace that, and just sends an electronic signal to the computer to fire the plug, you know, when everything's in the right position as it goes around. Same thing, similar, you know, it's got a rotor in it, but it's just a rotor inside the top of the synchronizer. And but it's really hard to get to, so we're gonna have to take off a bunch of stuff in here. So let me get into there and let's take a look at this. Okay. It's not necessary to take this off, but I find it so much easier to get things out of the way to get down there, because there is very little room to reach that sensor. Throttle body. Inch and a 1/16. That's that pipe that connects to the EGR valve. All right, so there's the EGR valve. So there's a little flange on there with 2 bolts that hold it onto that bracket down there. The other thing I usually do is take this pipe out. This is coolant pipe, and some people say they can get it out without that out of there, but I think I'm going to have to move it. It goes in. There's an O-ring that goes into the top of the water pump. So I've got a pan underneath the vehicle to catch any coolant. Get that out of the way, we can get at the synchronizer. There's a little clamp that holds that pipe into the top of the water pump. It's a 10mm bolt. That part here with the O-ring on it went down into the top of the water pump. Okay, so we got that pulled up out of the way. And now we get our first good look at the synchronizer. Okay, so I couldn't find a 5.5 millimeter, so I found a socket that fit it, and it's 7/32. So got a long extension on it, and they won't come all the way out. They're sort of captured in the cover, you know. Okay, the sensor, it's got a little carbon on it. It doesn't look too bad. And the synchronizer, yeah, it doesn't look too bad. The one that failed in that other video, you know, at the top of the screen, if you go look at that, the top right of the screen there, suggested videos. It's another video I made, and I found that the seal had failed coming up out of the engine block, and it had contaminated the sensor. But you can go over and take a look at that video, and you'll see what I mean. But this one doesn't look too bad at all. I'm wondering if I should change it now that I'm down that far. Okay, I am going to change the synchronizer. That's the top of the synchronizer right here. And okay, the body stays stationary, bolted down to the block. And there's a little half moon right here. I'm touching it right there, and then I'll move the tool out of the way so you can see it. That little half moon, that's the actuator. That when that swings by the sensor, it tells the sensor in what position the camshaft is in relation to the piston. So it'll fire the engine at the right moment. And before we take the synchronizer out, what we have to do is we have to turn the engine by hand until we can install the tool. See, this tool's got a cam on the other side of it too, like that, see? So, see how there's a slot in the front of the synchronizer? At the front. And there's a notch in this tool right here. See that notch in the front of the tool right there? Okay. We have to turn the engine by hand so that little vane that turns comes around to the left-hand side, and we can sit the tool on. Okay, once we can sit the tool on, we know that the engine is turned to a place where it's #1 top dead center on the compression stroke. Okay, and it's verified by this tool being in the right position on the synchronizer. Then we can loosen that bolt, pull the synchronizer out of the block. Okay, so I'm just turning the engine by turning the fan pulley. The belt's tight enough that it's turning the engine. Now that, see, that little half moon has moved. And if you watch it, see, it's turning clockwise. So as I turn the engine, it's going around. Hopefully you can see that in there. And you can see it actually is contaminated with a bit of carbon deposits and stuff, sort of like that other one that had failed. So we're getting close now. See, that half moon is coming up on the left. Now, a little farther. And we'll just get it so far, and then we'll try and put the tool on there. It's almost there. Okay, let's just try the tool. That's in the right spot now. The tool sits right down on it. Let me show you that on the other synchronizer. See, what we did was we turned the engine, and that came around like this. Got it to about here, and we took the tool. The arrow has to point towards that notch. Okay, you got to get it to a point where you can sit the tool on there without any interference, and it has to go right down as far as the O-ring. See that? So if we were back here, the tool's not going to come down. So you line that up, you turn it around and put the tool on, and then you don't turn the engine again until you put the new synchronizer in. Okay, so you line it up, put the tool on, and then when you know it's in that position, the right position, pull out the synchronizer, put the tool on the new synchronizer you're going to install, make sure it's in that position, drop it in, and tighten it down. And how far it's turned one way or the other is not critical. So long as you've got the engine timed like that, as long as you followed those steps, you don't have to worry about, you know, which way this is pointing exactly when it came out, because it's a circle, you know, it could be anywhere. If you've got the static timing set, that's the static timing set with that little half moon off to one side with the tool on before you take the synchronizer out, you know your timing's on. Pull that out, put the other one in. If it sits exactly, that's good. If it sits a little off, it's still good. It's still going to fire perfectly, you know. And if you want to find out exactly why, you know, that doesn't matter, look at that video I created before. The link's in the top of the video here. Okay, so I got the hold down bolt off there. It's a 10mm head, and it's a wrestling match to get it off. So I got that out of there, and just remove the tool. And we know it's lined up right. The engine's turned to the right spot. So I'm going to pull that synchronizer out of there now. One caution: don't drop anything down the hole. Don't drop anything in the hole. Once you get it pulled out of there, you will regret it. Okay, there's the synchronizer. It's got the oil pump drive sticking out of it. Don't forget to put the oil pump drive in your new synchronizer, because you won't have any oil. You'll ruin that engine quick. Okay, now usually I put a rag over the hole down there. Put a rag over there until I get ready to put the other one in. Okay, so when I first looked at the synchronizer in the block, I didn't think there was any oil contamination on it. But as I have it up here and I look at it, you can see there's oil in it. Okay, so that's, I think what I was experiencing when I was driving was an early sign of a failure. And I'll show you the sensor, just one second. So there's the sensor that came out of it. And you can see there's carbon and oil deposits here around the contact. And here's the one I'm going to be putting in. You can see how clean it is compared to it. See, that's pristine. This has got, actually I didn't want to move it until I got it on camera to show you, but see there's a big piece of crud here like that, greasy. So that would have been oil that came up the shaft out of the crankcase, and it's just been getting dried in there, and it's causing probably the problem that I'm having, you know, that periodic hesitation under load. And because that's what it was doing before when the other one failed. It was actually contaminated worse, and you'll see that, you know, in the video in the top of the screen there. If you go back and look at that, you'll see how badly contaminated the other one was. But that one threw a code, and the engine was almost undrivable. This is, I think, an early indicator of that same problem that was going to happen if I let it long enough. So I'm glad I caught it. I think this is going to fix the issue. I just want to show you between a clean synchronizer and one that has oil contamination. You can see the oil contamination in the one we just pulled out. And here's one without that. See that? See how clean that half moon is and everything? There's no oil on it. So that's a common failure. I've had that happen twice now. You know, the oil comes up through here. There's some type of a seal or a bushing in there that fails and allows oil to come up into the top. It contaminates the sensor, and that causes trouble. Okay, I'm gonna get this one ready. And so what we're gonna do is we're gonna take the oil pump drive shaft. Okay, we take that out of here. And we put it in, it's just a hex. We put it in the one we're gonna use. Okay, now I'm gonna put a drop of oil on this gear. Oil on the O-ring. We're going to put the alignment tool on the top, and we're going to stick it down in the hole. Okay, so I got this bolt tightened down, so that's not going to turn. And you see the tool is still sitting easily on top of the synchronizer. Right down, and I can pull that off now. Pull that off, see? And we know that that little vein on the left is in the right spot. We can double check by seeing how easily the tool sits down. And see, it sits right down, no forcing it. Okay, so we know that's in the right spot. And the engine hasn't turned, okay? So our timing is set. Now, we're just gonna put the sensor on top of the synchronizer, and screw that down, and then we'll hook the rest of this up. Okay, so all the coolant that I recovered is back in here. Now all that remains on this particular job is I got to put my spark plugs back in, because I had taken those out initially. And we'll test fire this up and see what happens.